In this video from ITFreeTraining, I will look at how to use NTFS quotas on Windows Server 2012 R2. NTFS quotas have been around since Windows 2000 and are simple and easy to use. However, if you want more functionality, you should have a look at File Server Resource Manager, which is available in Windows Server 2008 and above. I will now change to my computer running Windows Server 2012 R2 and have a look at how to use NTFS quotas. To enable NTFS quotas, I will first open Windows Explorer. The drive that I want to enable quotas on is the D drive, so I will right-click it and select Properties. Once the properties have opened, I will next select the tab Quota. From the Quota tab, you can enable quotas by simply ticking the tick box Enable Quota Management. This will enable quotas, but users at this stage will not be limited to how much disk space they can use. The next tick box down is Deny disk space to users exceeding quota limit. When this tick box is ticked, users will be denied access to write files to the drive when they are over their quota. If you only want to test disk quotas out, I would recommend leaving this tick box unticked until you have finished your testing and are ready to enable quotas. The next stage is to configure how much disk space users can use. You can see the next option down is configured to Do Not Limit Disk Usage. This is the default option for users. Currently, it will not limit disk space. To limit disk space, select the option Limit Disk Space to and enter in an amount. In this case, I will limit disk usage to 100 megabytes. This is sometimes referred to as a hard limit because the user will be prevented from writing to the disk once they reach this limit. You can understand that this may prevent the user from saving any files and may cause certain software not to run correctly. Potentially, the user could lose data if they are unable to write to the disk. For this reason, you should also configure the second option, Set Warning Level to. In this case, I will set this to 70 megabytes. This is sometimes referred to as a soft limit. With some additional work, it is possible to have the user receive a warning message when they go over this limit. However, the functionality to do this is not built into NTFS quotas. The user will still be able to write files to the drive until they reach the hard limit. When they reach the hard limit, they will be denied access. These are all the options that you need to configure in order to start using quotas. However, there are two tick boxes that you may want to consider ticking in order for the administrator to get more information about what is happening. The first tick box is Log Event when a user exceeds their quota limit. When a user attempts to exceed their quota and is denied access, an event will be logged in the event viewer. The second tick box, Log Event when a user exceeds their warning level, will log an event in the event viewer when the user exceeds their warning level. If the administrator views the event viewer and sees a lot of these messages, it will mean they need to reconsider their quota limits. Perhaps the limits are set too low for the needs of the user. Information like this may also be useful for the administrator to put forward a business case to management to have the amount of space increased. When I press OK, notice that I will get a message. This is basically saying that once quotas are enabled, the volume will need to be scanned. This is required in order to determine how much space each user is currently using. The number of files you have will determine how long the process will take. With large drives, you may want to consider doing this outside business hours. Personally, if I were to enable quotas using NTFS quotas on a large volume, I would simply enable quotas and not configure it. This would allow this process to complete. Once complete, then I would start configuring the options for quotas, like how much space the user is allowed to use. In this case, I will press OK and enable quotas, as there are not many files on the drive, and the process will not take too long to complete. Disk quotas work on how many files on the drive have the owner set to that user. If I open the D drive and open the properties for a file on the D drive, I will then have a look at who is the owner of this file. From the properties of the file, I will select the Security tab, and then at the bottom I will press the button Advanced. On the Advanced Security Settings screen, you can see that the owner of the file is currently set to Administrators. If I press Change, I will now change the owner of the file to the user, John Doe. Now that the owner has been changed, I will exit out of here to commit the changes and go back to Windows Explorer. The file is over 70 megabytes in size and thus will put the user over their soft quota. I will now open Server Manager and then select Event Viewer from under the Tools menu. Once the Event Viewer is open, I will next open the system log found under Windows Logs. Notice the NTFS event. If I open this event, it states that a user has reached their quota threshold. The username is not in the description. However, notice that you can see which user it is at the bottom of the screen. I will now exit out of here and go back to Windows Explorer. Next, I will open the properties of the D drive and select the Quota tab. So far, I have created default quotas for all users. However, it is also possible to create quota entries for individual users. To do this, I press the button at the bottom of the screen, Quota Entries. You will notice that at the top of the screen there's a warning message for the user John Doe. Since this user has gone over the soft quota limit, an entry was created in here. It is important to be aware of this when you change quota entries or enable quotas on a drive that may have had quotas on it before. If there are entries in here for that user, they will override the default settings. If you change or enable quotas, you may need to delete entries in here for the quotas to work correctly for that user. If you attempt to delete an entry in here and that user is over their quota, the system will not let you delete the entry until the user is under their quota. To do this, you will need to remove some files or change the owner of those files to a different user. Changing the owner of a file may get around the problem, but it is not always the best practice. To create a new quota entry, select the menu Quota and then select the option New Quota Entry. If you have a particular user that needs more data than the default option will allow, it is a simple matter to create a quota entry for that user. You will also notice that there is a quota entry for the administrators group, and below this is an entry for the system user. Both of these entries are set to no limit. This essentially means that the administrators and the system users are not affected by quotas. If they were to be denied access to the drive, in particular the system user, this could potentially crash the system. For this system, these quota entries cannot be deleted. If you wanted to, you could also create an entry for a user with no space limit. I will change to my Windows 8.1 computer to have a look at how quotas affect the user. If I open Windows Explorer, I have a drive mapped to the server that has the quotas enabled on it. You will notice that Windows Explorer reports that there are 22 megabytes free of a 100 megabyte drive. The drive itself is 100 gigabytes in size, but since quotas are enabled, the user will only see 100 megabytes available, as that is all the user can use. If I now open the drive, there is one file in here which I will attempt to copy and paste. You will notice that I get an error message saying there is not enough space on the drive. This, unfortunately, is the only message the user will receive when using quotas. To demonstrate this better, I will move the file to the desktop and then move it back to the network drive. This essentially will take the usage of the drive down to 0 and then put it over the soft quota. You will notice that no warning message is displayed. Unfortunately, with Windows, this is by design. To get around this, what you can do is create a trigger in the event log on the server. When a quota event is logged, the trigger configured for that event can run a script that will send a message to the user. A bit of extra work, but unfortunately there is no other way to do it. That concludes this video, which I hope you've found useful. For more videos from us, please check out our YouTube channel or webpage. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.